Hi, folks. I'm Abel James, and welcome to the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Today's special guest is a man named Scott Gryzbek, and he's the creator and founder of Zukay Live Foods. We'll be getting to that in a second. But before we do, I just wanted to let you know, if you sign up for my email list today at fatburningman.com, I'll be shooting you a free ebook. So all you have to do is head on over to fatburningman.com and put in your best email address, and I'll shoot it right over to you. Also, if you want to follow me on Facebook, it's facebook.com/fatburningman, and I announce a lot of free stuff and giveaways on that page. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at FatBurnMan, no ing in that one. So thanks for listening to the show. If you haven't already, I'd love it if you could leave an iTunes review. It helps a lot, and I always appreciate hearing from you guys. All right, so on to the show with Scott. We talk about, well, let's talk about who Scott is. Scott is the proud founder and CEO of Zukay Live Foods, and they make a vegetable kvass, which is just ridiculously tasty. And after working in the food industry for a number of years for some big names and players in the game, Scott just found it hard to sell foods that he wouldn't feed to his own kids. So instead, he started Zukay to bring the health benefits of raw fermented vegetables back into the American diet. Definitely some parallels from my past there. For those of you who don't know, I worked as a strategic consultant for years with the federal government, as well as Fortune 500 companies, and some of them are food manufacturers. So the way that the sausage is made behind the scenes is not always all that wonderful for the end consumer. So it was great to talk to Scott a bit about that. So we talk about what it was like to live paleo before paleo was paleo, a behind the scenes look at why food manufacturers and the government create foods that you probably shouldn't feed to your kids, how you can make fermented foods at home, and why a beer may be good for you from time to time. All right, let's go hang out with Scott. All right, folks, we're here with Scott, who's the proud founder and CEO of Zukay Live Foods, who are the makers of vegetable kvass, a ridiculously tasty beverage. How's it going, Scott?
Excellent. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So we were just talking before the show about how you were actually living paleo before paleo was paleo. So can you talk a little bit about what that means?
I guess I've always been a bit of a Luddite, and as I got older and older, I just really wonder how people used to live. I started to think of how much weaker we were becoming as a society as all this technology and services started to take away so much of what we as human beings have done for thousands and millions of years. And it just didn't seem right to me. And so, little by little, pieces started to fall in place, started to raise my own food. I started to get into foraging, started to get into traditional foods, very much so. I would say it started more from a food standpoint, but it's become many more other things in my life. I came to the company, I came to start the company because I really started eating in a very traditional manner, was raising my boys in a very, very traditional food manner.
Yeah.
And I was selling products. I was a brand manager for large companies, and I was selling products I wouldn't bring home.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of living this double lifestyle. And I got tired of it. I saw that there was a huge gap in the food world for fermented stuff that was every day. Mm-hmm. And, that's kind of what we launched Zukay, being like, hey, maybe you don't love kimchi, maybe you don't love sauerkraut, but this is a tasty beverage. This is a tasty salad dressing. These are ways to get these traditional foods into your system without really changing so much what you do. Now, I can't change everybody's thought to become paleo and to start going away from so many things that I believe have taken away a big part of our humanity.
Right.
But I can at least do this for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually worked with the food industry as well when I was a consultant, and it was a somewhat unsavory experience for the most part. So can you talk a little bit about how the sausage is made over there?
You mean our sausage, or
we'll talk about that later. But let's talk about just how did it get to the point where you're working for a company that creates food for people that you wouldn't bring home?
Well, and here's It's a bunch of different things that I don't believe. I will say this: 98% plus of the people who work for the food companies are good people who who have absolutely no thoughts of doing harm to anybody. Don't think that they are doing harm.
Right.
Many think that they're doing good, and many don't really care one way or another. But they certainly aren't like, yeah, I'm selling death here.
Right.
Nope. I mean, unless you're working for like a cigarette company,
Sure.
You're working for a food company. You don't believe that you're doing that at all.
Right.
But what I would say has become the biggest problem is, certainly from the company standpoint, is that the profit motive is absolutely the biggest issue.
Yeah.
In that, especially with the bigger food companies, where you've got quarterly earnings to hit for Wall Street, and so that's the biggest issue. It's not so much, you're not worried about the health. Most food companies, while they are not all about giving bad stuff to people, they're also not about giving good stuff to people.
Right.
They're about giving stuff to people that people want. And if that happens to have a whole bunch of monosodium glutamate in it, great, we'll give it to them.
Yeah.
I do believe that most people who work for food companies don't believe a lot of what we believe in. And certainly our government doesn't help out any they prop this stuff up.
Yeah.
So you've got a whole bunch of different things going on that conspire against people living a truly good, healthy, natural lifestyle. None of these things in and of itself are necessarily a conspiracy against us, but they're also not helping us out any at all. And so, when I look back at my past, I'm not ashamed of it. I don't look upon almost anybody that I worked with as having been evil, bad, any of that stuff. There's just a system that doesn't work out in our best for our best needs. That's really what it is. And our culture, people are complicit in this as well.
Yeah.
While we can certainly look at these food companies and say, you have given us all this high fructose corn syrup, and you've given us all these unnatural sweeteners, and you've done awful things with vegetable oils and all this kind of stuff. We, as our society, are just as complicit in this as well, because this is what we want. I want my stuff fast. I want my stuff to taste this yummy, this sweet, and I don't really care, or I don't believe that this is unhealthy, or I don't do the math to say, well, I am what I eat. We have allowed this to happen. If 90% of America rose up and said, you know what, we're not going to eat this garbage anymore.
Yeah.
Then tomorrow it would change, and you are starting to see that. Little by little, companies are at least changing some stuff. Quite often it is, along the lines of greenwashing, but it is, things are different than they were 10 years ago. There's no doubt about that. And I think in a lot of ways it's better. In some ways it's worse.
Yeah.
You do have two parts of America that are diverging from each other fairly quickly. You've got our side, whether it's Paleo, Westnick Price, vegan, raw vegan, just regular organic shoppers. You got these people who are going in this one direction saying, I'm going to take control of my health. I'm going to read labels. I'm going to figure out what I need to eat. And for some people that's different than other people, but it's all coming from the same place. Yeah. Which hasn't been there for a generation. Right. And then you got the other side that's saying, man, I just want to put whatever food I can into my kid to make him be quiet. Yeah. And this is easy, so it's great. Yeah. You've got these two sides, both growing, both diverging. And the other side doesn't always want to listen to us until unfortunately they get told by a doctor, you've got to change the way that you eat or you're going to die. Yeah. And too often you hear stories of people, hey, this is why I'm into health food, because I was going to die, my mom was going to die. Right. All these issues. And so I believe that is unfortunately helping our movement out a lot.
Yeah. It's so bizarre that it has to get to that point where people are saying, you are literally going to die unless you start eating differently. It's unfortunate that it has to get there as an entry point, but I think we'll take what we can get at this point.
We will take what we can get, and hopefully people will start looking at it so much more of, why would I eat that? That could hurt me.
Right.
And that's the way I've had a lot of people ask me, so what got you into this? As in like, okay, tell me your sob story of your kids were emaciated because they had this horrible gluten thing, or you were 300 pounds, or you were suffering from, no, there's none of that for me. Mm-hmm. I was raised well. My mom raised me fairly well to eat healthy. We were pretty rare, and I was always the weird kid in school with food. Certainly never any sugar. My mom really wouldn't let me eat much with chips and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I look back at my diet. It was still what I would consider to be fairly unhealthy, but back then we were the health foodist. So always kind of thought, why do I want to do all that? Why do I want to go through this and get unhealthy? I don't want to be unhealthy. I love health. Health is awesome. So it's always come from that standpoint of, well, I don't want to be that.
Right.
And I believe that living this way has certainly helped out my life, helped my kids out, helped my wife out. I like the fact that I don't have that. I think that, that's what I'd really like to get to as many people as possible, is that, you can take control of your life and not get into these problems. Yeah,
absolutely. So why don't we talk about exactly what fermented foods, what role they can play in a healthy person's diet? Why should people consider eating these weird, fizzy, bizarre vegetables that have been stewing about for a while?
Well, when you look back at like almost every culture, I mean, certainly the cultures that we know about from a historical standpoint, and they believe well into prehistory as well, that humans have fermented vegetables as well as other stuff to preserve them, and that people figured out over many, many generations that, hey, it's not just preserving this stuff, it's actually making it better, it's making us healthier. They didn't know why, but they certainly kept eating them. There's a couple of reasons. The biggest one that if you know about the health benefits of fermented foods, the biggest thing is the probiotics. That's what really is the best known thing about fermented foods. It's usually lactobacilli, but it can be other fermenters as well. But the lactobacilli turn the lactic acid, or turn sugars into lactic acid in the vegetables. And that's what preserves them. And then as long as you don't cook it, those lactobacilli are still going to be in there. They're going to become your friends. Yeah. They populate your gut. And back in the day, there were many less things that were depopulating your gut of the good things. Some of the things that hurt you today are stress, too much sugar, too much coffee, too much alcohol, too little sleep. Antibiotics certainly is a big one. Sure. There are all these things going on that are taking away from your gut, and things like fermented vegetables, raw fermented vegetables, are adding to your gut. So that is a huge thing. I do get a lot of people saying, well, why can't I just take a pill? I don't know the efficacy of, what we make or raw sauerkraut versus a pill, but I do know this. It's a real food that people have been eating forever. Yeah. And forever, people thought that this was great stuff. I'm going to go with forever versus a pill. I also, the other thing is, if you go with a pill, then you miss out on everything else. Yeah. One of the great things about fermentation is that it keeps, it locks in all that great nutrition of the vegetable, and it makes it easier for you to digest it. So, I often talk about cabbage in fermentation because cabbage is, certainly one of the biggest things that people ferment worldwide. Yeah. If you were to sit down, chop up a cabbage and just eat it, outside of the fact that if you don't flavor it, it's not going to taste real good. Yeah. Your body's going to have a heck of a time trying to fully digest and get everything out of that cabbage. Right. Most of that is just going to pass right through you. Yeah. It's kind of stressful to your body, and it's just not the way that cabbage was meant to be eaten. But there's so many great things in cabbage, and in many brassicas and many vegetables. This isn't just cabbage. Fermentation. Not that you really want to think of this, but those bacteria are eating the cabbage, and they're kind of pre-digesting it for you.
Right.
They're unlocking all these great nutrients for you so that your body can absorb them much better. So you've got that. You've also got the fact that these bacteria will actually create enzymes that didn't exist before. So the enzymes that had been there are still there, and there's even more so. So it's even easier to digest. And from what I understand, is that fermented foods actually have more enzymes that are needed to digest the fermented foods. So those enzymes are there to even help your body out digest other things as well.
Right.
And we could all use help with that. So those are really the reasons to do it. Plus, it's traditional food. There's nothing bad in it if it's a raw fermented product. The amount of care, the amount of goodness that's in it is just so much better than anything else that you can get. And plus, you know what? I love the taste.
Yeah.
Personally, I love the taste.
Yeah, I know.
Not every fermented thing do I love, but
right. Some people freak out when I get them to try kombucha or something like that. But I think it is like you need to, I guess, develop the taste for fermented foods because they're tangy. And once you can get past that, they're sweet. But if you're used to being blasted with sugar and MSG and all this stuff, I think people kind of have a hard time coming on board and tasting the subtleties in the food and understanding that vegetables can taste good.
Yeah, if you're used to eating just sweet stuff or a lot of processed foods, then you might have a hard time with sauerkraut. You might have a hard time with our kibasas. You might have a hard time with kimchi or something like that. That's absolutely true, and I can very much tell when somebody has a very dinner is something something frozen from Stouffer's.
Yeah.
Breakfast is this cereal, and in between I have Fritos and a Snickers bar.
Right.
You can definitely tell when people don't have a taste for real foods, and that is kind of across the board. It's. I'm not looking to necessarily change everybody who lives like that. It's just not going to happen immediately.
Yeah.
Little by little, people have to come to it themselves. As they do, they will come to like these things. I'll admit, right off the bat, I was not a huge fan of raw sauerkraut.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Polish and grew up with Polish food, and very often sauerkraut is cooked, and it's cooked with things, whether it's with pork or pierogi or kielbasi.
Mm-hmm.
Sauerkraut's always there, but it's not always there raw.
Right.
And so for me to just have raw sauerkraut was like, how do I eat this? And then I eventually just started eating it as a side dish.
Yeah.
And in our family, it's a regular friend right there alongside, whatever meats and vegetables we're having that night.
Right.
So, it can take a little bit of training, but it's worth it.
So if you're
absolutely worth it.
Yeah, if you're fermenting at home though, or even for your business, how do you make sure that you're getting the good bacteria as opposed to the bad?
Well, it's really, really, really easy, to be honest with you, because the good bacteria ferment and the bad bacteria either don't do anything taste-wise or they rot.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to tell the difference between fermentation and rotting, because rotting is disgusting. You may not like fermented foods, perhaps,
mm-hmm.
but you wouldn't eat a fermented food and be like, "Oh my God, I just ate garbage."
Right.
Whereas if it rotted, you wouldn't even touch. You wouldn't even, unless you have no sense of smell.
Mm-hmm.
Then you wouldn't even, you'd throw it away immediately, like, "Oh my God, that's disgusting."
Yeah. So it's kind of like that putrid effect, that rotten.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rotten, putrid. Oh, yeah. If you have that reaction to what you fermented at home, then your best bet is to throw it away.
Yeah.
I will always tell people that if you're in doubt, throw it away.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not worth it to poison yourself. However, here's the nice thing: you get that nice sour fermented flavor. You have assured yourself of a good product, because to get there, to get to that flavor and taste and smell and everything, it's gone through the acidifying process of turning sugar into lactic acid.
Right.
When you go through that, you drop the pH like a rock. So the pH goes from somewhere around neutral to anywhere between, I'd say, 2.5 to 3.5. That's pretty normal range for most ferments. There's no bad bacteria that can survive below a pH of 5.1. Mm-hmm. So once you get below that, botulism's dead, E. coli's dead, listeria's dead. All those bad guys are dead. Mm-hmm. You can literally take salmonella and squirt it into sauerkraut. I wouldn't eat it immediately, but wait 24 to 48 hours. You're good to go. I wouldn't do that. By the way, don't do that at home. But the thing is that the acid will kill any bad bacteria. But lactobacilli, totally cool with it.
Yeah, very interesting.
So that's why. And think of it in this way. Go back 5,000 years. There was no such thing as pH meters. Mm-hmm. There was no such thing as, washing vegetables and bleaching them and cooking, and all that kind of stuff. Things were done in what we would consider a very unsanitary fashion.
Right.
Yet people survived and people made ferments all the time. They knew what was good and what wasn't. They weren't poisoning themselves on a regular basis. If they were poisoning themselves on a regular basis, it would be my guess that fermentation would not have survived the age.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's actually really safe and really easy.
So what about the acid-alkaline balance? If you have a lot of fermented foods, does that mean you're at risk of not being alkaline enough?
From what I understand, I am not an expert at the acid-alkaline balance, but from what I've been told by many people, is that similar to lemon juice, that though they are acidic going in, the effect that they have on the metabolism is alkalinizing.
I think that's so interesting.
You will. Yeah, there should be no imbalance from that standpoint.
Right.
Like I said, I don't know much about that, so I'm not an expert to be able to talk about it any more than that. But it's my understanding that there is no imbalance.
Yeah. Very interesting. Now, can you talk about, not to trash other products, but I talk to a lot of people kind of in the industry about green juices or juices in general that are on the shelf that are pasteurized and that sort of thing. Or even, some people, especially the devout raw vegans, will say, 2 hours after your fruit or veggies are macerated or broken up in any particular way, they lose all of their nutrients. So you have to drink them right away. So can you comment on that a little bit? Like the drinks that most people see at the store, what are they actually like?
Well, I don't know completely all the science of everything breaking down. I would say that if you truly juice a raw thing, that you're going to oxidize a whole bunch of stuff, and that the shelf life is very limited. As far as a lot of these new raw-ish juices that are getting out there that go through this high pressure thing, I'll be honest with you, a couple weeks after, since nothing else has been done to them, I would think after a couple weeks that you are going to lose a good deal of nutrition in them. So what we do that's different with the fermentation is that we cut up the vegetables and we ferment them first. Mm-hmm. And then we put them through a very non-oxidative press. So a lot of this, so it doesn't go through the same process. What we don't do is we don't juice vegetables and then ferment the juice.
Right.
Or we don't buy somebody's juice and ferment that. Mm-hmm. So it's very different. So everything's preserved. And so now by the time that it goes through the juicing process, it's very different than if you just took a carrot and juiced it.
Right.
So it's not the same thing anymore. So that's why we call it kvass. It's not a juice. And I get a lot of people saying, I love your beet juice. Like, oh, okay. Not a juice.
Well, it kind of tastes like beet juice, though, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, in some ways it is beet juice because, it's a beet and we eventually juice it. It's just that this fermentation process that we put it through is so unbelievably important.
Yeah.
And is really the crux of what we do. And so that takes it away from being a juice.
Right.
So we're not really, so those things, I would say this. I don't believe that they're the equal of a kvass. If you had to drink one or the other, I would say a kvass is way healthier on a regular basis. However, again, going back to what I had said before, in that you've got these two diverging movements, and that they're both gaining steam. The fact that these things exist out there is better than a couple years ago when they didn't.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point.
Yeah, so while I don't think that they're the equal of my product, I would say that I welcome them on the shelf from the standpoint that they're a whole lot better than stuff you could have drank 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. And even with, when people talk about other products, I drink V8, not on a regular basis, but, when I'm in a store and I'm thirsty, I drink V8. It's not that bad stuff. It's vegetables. They don't screw around with it too much.
Yeah. Fortunately.
Again, it's not the equal of our kvass, but
right.
Hey, we do live in an imperfect world.
Yeah.
And so at some point, you got to make do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm interested just in terms of the business aspect of this. How do you bring such a, I guess, novel substance to, especially like the American market when it is a premium price point and kind of something weird that most people don't know about? Like I remember when I saw it for the first time. Obviously, I hadn't met you. I did it Paleo FX, which was super cool to see the guy who makes it. But I was actually I was at a college reunion at the Dartmouth Co-op, which is like a natural food store in the area. And I'm just like, what is this crazy stuff? Because every time I see something new like that, I'm kind of excited. I'm like, this looks really neat. But it was $5, and I think for me, that's just even more exciting because I'm like, oh, that must be super weird then. But how do you compete with like V8 juice?
Oh, it's extremely difficult. I will tell you, I've had a few people be like, oh, I would love to start something like what you're doing. Like, that's luck, man.
Yeah.
This is tough. It is wonderful being the category leader. It's wonderful inventing the category and all that kind of stuff. We're the first movers and all this kind of stuff, and that's great. But we're first movers in a category that nobody knows what it is.
Yeah.
It's not easy. There are quite a few stores out there that love us, that support us no matter what. And then there's others who are like, hey, you don't move nearly as much as kombucha, so we're kicking you out.
Yeah.
We get both. And I'll just say this. Every time that I get an email from somebody or a phone call from somebody or meet somebody at a show where they thank me for doing this, it makes every drop of it worthwhile.
Yeah.
I never got that back when I worked for the other companies, no matter what we did. Nobody ever thanked me for doing any of that stuff. And people thank me because there's a value of what we bring. So it's difficult. We take our lumps and we constantly hold on till the time that a large mass of people finally figure out, oh my God, this is what I should have been drinking all along.
Yeah.
And we thank our supporters every day, and I'm glad to be adding to the world instead of just being just another product,
right?
Or being something that subtracts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy enough being that, and with the knowledge that eventually enough people will figure out to really make this into something.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I was very excited, and it's delicious. Those of you out there who haven't tried it, it's absolutely worth trying. I don't really drink juices that much just because they're high glycemic typically, or they've been on a shelf or something like that. But I'm always excited when I see yours and I pick up a few of them. How does it compare from a health perspective to something like kombucha?
I would say that it's considerably healthier, and the only reason I say that is because kombucha is fermented tea and sugar.
Yeah.
And our products start with vegetables.
Right. And so when I taste it, it definitely there's much more there. Kombucha is definitely a drink. Kvass is more like it's more like a meal. It's like a like a Guinness.
I guess. Like, I've never looked at them as meal replacements. You know, and I have read stuff that there are certain acids that are made in kombucha, and there's certainly certain antioxidants from the tea that we don't have.
Sure.
But I just look at it and say, well, that's fermented tea and sugar, and we ferment vegetables and we juice them, and so therefore we've just got a lot more nutrition.
Right.
And I know that there are products out there. There are some probiotic drinks that use lab-made bacteria.
Right.
That I don't agree with at all. You know, for the kombuchas that are totally real, that are, you know, that are made purely from the kombucha mother, as they always have been, those are probably pretty good, healthy products. I don't drink them, but
oh, really?
I honestly, no. Well, I used to when there was no other raw fermented beverage. I honestly, I've never liked the flavor. I don't like the flavor of any of that. I don't like the flavor of water kefir. I don't like the flavor of kombucha. That's a purely personal thing.
Yeah.
Just, I never liked it. I mean, I like beer, which so I don't know why I didn't ever really dug kombucha all that much, but I drank it because I had no other choice, really. Well, but that's a totally personal thing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't tell anybody, if somebody's drinking a lot of kombucha and they want to try our kvass, mix and match.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say don't stop drinking kombucha. Wouldn't say that at all. You know, there is a place for both products, and I think that having two different types of raw fermented beverages only makes everybody better.
Yeah. Now, can you talk a little bit about beer? Because when you think about it, it doesn't sound all that different in terms of the process of making it. But of course, mainstream beer is awful for you. But is there such thing as like a somewhat healthy homemade or microbrewed beer?
Well, you know, I have read an awful lot about health benefits of beer. Now, it is different because that's yeast turning sugar into alcohol.
Right.
So it's very different ferment. So from that standpoint, it is very different, and you're doing this with grains and with hops and not with vegetables. But I've read an awful lot of that for a real traditional beer, which there are plenty of in America today. Oh, it's so much better drinking beer now than when I was in college.
I bet.
And I do enjoy, you know, my favorite is a local one here called Victory, which is totally unpasteurized.
Oh, I know them, yeah.
And supposedly, great stuff. But supposedly there's a ton of vitamins in there, and then supposedly that this is, you know, people understood this back in the day, and beer was, I don't know if it was sacred, but it certainly was appreciated on a other level other than getting you drunk.
Yeah.
So no, I think over the past 10 years, a lot of stuff has come out about the health benefits of, you know, some alcohols that, as long as you don't, you know, go out and pound them down and day after day after day, that this is actually good stuff for you. Yeah. Again, you know, much like fermented vegetables, these are things that have been in the human diet for way longer than we've had writing.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's the abuse of these things that causes the problem. There's obviously some benefits to them.
Yeah.
And while I don't make beer, I certainly have not shied away from having, you know, a few here and there.
Every once in a while, it's a weekend.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you create the whole process of getting the vegetables and then winding up with the fermented beverage that you wind up with. So can you kind of walk us through quickly the process?
Yeah, sure. It's pretty simple. I mean, obviously there's some things that we do that I won't share because those are our trade secrets,
Sure.
but I can give you the bones of it. I mean, first off, we source virtually everything that we use is organic. We get it either locally during season, which, you know, in Pennsylvania is unfortunately too short.
Yeah.
Or we use, we've got a couple good organic produce companies nearby that we work with. All of our vegetables come in whole, just like you would see them in a supermarket or a farmer's market. So we're working with just the best and purest stuff. We then take the vegetables, we grind them all up together, and we do what people have done for time immemorial for fermenting. We close everything off to air as much as we can. And, we actually make our own culture here, which is all just lactobacilli, and we add that in and let it go for a couple weeks until we consider it to be fully fermented. At that time, then we either, if it's our salad dressings, we just bottle it right up. If it's our beverages, we juice them and bottle them right up and refrigerate them. So it's really simple. But here's the thing that I love about it. As I said, we've been doing this for a couple years. We know what to do. We've come up with some pretty cool ways of making this to help us out. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that we do that you couldn't do yourself in your kitchen.
Yeah. So,
and to me, that's we have to stick with that. Whatever we do as Zukay, it's got to be based like, okay, can somebody do this in the kitchen? Great, then we'll do it.
That's a great vision. I think that's really important, and it's so easy to lose sight of that, especially in the food manufacturing industry with all of these crazy byproducts that might save some money or be a shortcut in terms of production. It's so important to keep it real, because there are things that we simply cannot measure with the end product when you skip that step in between.
That's true. And, for us, it's like, hey, can we figure out a quicker way to cut cabbage? Okay, great. That's awesome.
Right.
Hey, somebody got us powdered cabbage. No. Right.
Powdered
this
cabbage.
has got to be something that you can go to a store, pick up the ingredients, go home, and make yourself. I mean, that is, and, so much of this comes from what I would give my kids. Because that is the other thing that I do for every one of my products. Would I give this to my kids right now, today, without a single thought?
Oh, I love that.
And if the answer is no, it's not going to be made by us. If I even have a thought of like, I wouldn't want them to have too much of this, then I forget about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
So that's a promise that I have made from day one.
Yeah. That is so cool. What are we're almost up on time here, but what are some quick tips for people who do want to get started at home? How can they work this into their lifestyle?
Like I said, I believe that you should eat fermented stuff every day, whether it's kvass, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, whatever. Eat a little bit every day. This is the kind of thing that is not just going to heal you, but as you do this on a regular basis, you're just overall going to find yourself living a much more vibrant lifestyle. So do that. If you want to do it yourself, there's a ton of YouTube videos out there, some of which are me, some of which are plenty of other people.
Yeah.
You always buy Wild Fermentation by Sandor Katz or
book,
Sally
yeah.
Fallon's Nourishing Tradition. They both, I started with Nourishing Traditions. That's where I started. And the other thing is if you're going to do it yourself, be brave. It takes seriously, I've met so many people who are like, oh, I tried it and I got some mold and I threw it away, or I wanted to try it, but it goes against everything in our culture to take food and leave it somewhere for up to a month, not refrigerated. It just doesn't make sense. For us, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to die if and so you're looking for an end product that proclaims itself to be safe.
Yeah.
Yet you don't know what safe is.
Right.
What I would say is this, start with sauerkraut. Sauerkraut's real easy to make. If it's real easy if it bubbles, and if it's sour, you won. And if it never bubbled and it's just kind of watery and it doesn't have a sour taste, throw it away. It's as simple as that. But if you get some mold, throw the mold away.
Yeah.
That's it. You're fine.
Yeah.
Otherwise. But be brave. And if you're not sure, and, like from my standpoint, I'm the tester. At home, if there's any question of whatever weird stuff I have made this week, if it's any good or not, if it's safe or not, Daddy is the one who tries it.
Yeah.
It's like, 'cause I'm strong and I'm the man, and hey, okay, well, let's see. If Daddy doesn't drop dead, then Mommy can try it, and if then Mommy doesn't drop dead, then the kids can try it. So we go through that, but understand that this is something that maybe you've never done before, and so you need to be a little bit more courageous in trying it, but do so. You know, I mean, and have fun with it. You can ferment almost any vegetable. I wouldn't do potatoes. But you can do almost any vegetable that's out there. Have fun with it. It's a thing of it's exciting. You know, you get to try something new and discover stuff. One of the greatest things about a paleo lifestyle is discovering things that we always knew.
Right.
That are really in somewhere in our brain. From a social consciousness standpoint, but just have never been exercised. Mm-hmm. I feel that exercising those things are just some of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had.
Yeah. Oh, that is so true. Well, Scott, we're just about out of time, but why don't you tell folks out there where they can find you and where they can find Kvass?
Great. Yeah, we're in many Whole Foods stores throughout the nation, not every one of them. But check out Whole Foods. If your Whole Foods doesn't have it, ask them for it. We're in natural food stores all over the place, and we're also in Wegmans. And if you can't find us in any of those places, go to wildmountainpaleo.com. And if you have any questions, find us on Facebook or go to our website, which is just Zukay.com, and ask us any questions that you have. We would love to answer them.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a lot of fun. It's a super important subject and definitely one that I'm interested in.
Well, thank you for having me on, Abel. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Anytime. All right. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Absolutely.